They thought it was just another day of enforcing the rules. They thought two young black men in hoodies couldn't possibly belong in the first-class cabin of an international flight. The gate agent, Patricia, called security. The manager, Greg, threatened to put them on the no-fly list. They wanted to humiliate Marcus and Tobias Sterling in front of 300 people. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They didn't check the manifest, and they certainly didn't know who was on the other end of the phone line. In the next hour, this airport staff wouldn't just lose their flights, they would lose their careers, their reputations, and their freedom. This is the story of the Sterling shutdown. The automatic sliding doors of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hissed open, letting in a gust of biting November wind. Marcus Sterling adjusted the collar of his oversized beige hoodie, pulling it tighter against his neck. Beside him, his twin brother, Tobias, yawned, stretching his arms high. They were exhausted. It had been a grueling 48 hours in Tokyo, closing a tech merger, and the 17-hour travel time back to the States had left them drained. All they wanted was to board the connecting flight to New York, sink into the lie-flat seats of the first-class cabin, and sleep until wheels down at JFK. They didn't look like typical business tycoons. They were 26 years old, 6'2", and black. They preferred high-end streetwear, Jerry Lorenzo hoodies, vintage Jordan 1s, and discreet tactical cargo pants over the stiff, itchy suits their father, Darius Sterling, used to wear in the 90s. To the untrained eye, they looked like college athletes or perhaps rappers. To the trained eye, the vintage Patek Philippe on Marcus's wrist and the limited edition Goyard duffel bag Tobias carried whispered quiet, heavy wealth. But Patricia Gables, the lead gate agent for Stratosphere Airlines at Gate K-12, did not have a trained eye. She had a tired, prejudiced eye. As the twins navigated the sea of travelers, they approached the boarding lanes. The economy line was already snake-like, winding back past the Hudson newsstand. The priority first-class lane, bordered by a plush red carpet, was empty. Marcus tapped Tobias on the shoulder and jerked his chin toward the red carpet. "Let's go. I need champagne and a pillow, immediately." Tobias chuckled. "I just need the pillow. You can have my champagne." They stepped onto the red carpet. The air shifted immediately. It was a subtle thing, something they had felt 1,000 times before. The feeling of eyes snapping toward them, heavy with suspicion. Patricia Gables was standing behind the podium, typing furiously on her computer. She was in her mid-50s, wearing a uniform that was slightly too tight, her blonde hair sprayed into a helmet of immobility. She didn't look up until Marcus was 2 feet away. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice low and polite. He held out his phone, the QR code for his boarding pass glowing on the screen. Patricia looked up. Her gaze raked over Marcus's hoodie, dropped to his sneakers, and then flicked over to Tobias. She didn't look at the phone. She looked at the economy line, then back at them. "The line starts back there," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward the mass of people near the newsstand. Her tone wasn't helpful. It was dismissive, like she was shooing away pigeons. Marcus smiled, a tight, practiced expression. "Actually, Mom, we're flying first. This is the priority lane, correct?" Patricia let out a sharp, incredulous breath. She finally made eye contact, and it was cold. "This lane is for first-class passengers and global services members. Economy boarding will begin by group number in 20 minutes. You need to wait with everyone else." "We know what the lane is for," Tobias said, stepping up beside his brother. He kept his voice calm, though his jaw tightened. "We are in first class, seat 1A and 1B. If you just scan the pass—" "I don't need to scan anything to know you're in the wrong place," Patricia snapped, her voice raising an octave. "Do not block the carpet for the actual priority customers. Move. Behind them, a middle-aged man in a grey suit cleared his throat. He was holding a gold status card visibly in his hand. Come on, fellas, the man muttered. Don't hold up the line. Some of us actually paid for our seats. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. It wasn't the anger of youth anymore. It was the cold burn of injustice. He looked at the man in the suit, then back at Patricia. Ma'am, Marcus said, placing his phone on the scanner counter. Scan the code. If it rejects, we walk. If it's green, you let us board. Simple. Patricia grabbed the phone, but she didn't scan it. She turned it over, looking at the case, then shoved it back across the counter toward Marcus, so hard it nearly slid off the edge. I am not playing games with you, she hissed. Security is 10 feet away. Do you want to fly today, or do you want to spend the afternoon in a holding cell for harassment? Back of the line. The commotion was drawing attention. People in the nearby waiting area had lowered their newspapers and removed their AirPods. Phones were coming out. The spectacle of two young black men being scolded by a white airline employee was apparently prime content for the evening feed. Tobias put a hand on Marcus's chest, a silent signal to stay cool. Tobias was the negotiator. Marcus was the hammer. They needed the negotiator right now. Okay, Tobias said, raising his hands in a surrender motion. Let's lower the temperature. What is your name? He looked at her name tag. Patricia. Okay, Patricia. We aren't trying to cause trouble. We are tired. We have valid tickets. Why are you refusing to simply check us in? Because I have a job to do, Patricia said, crossing her arms. And part of that job is keeping the riffraff out of the premium cabin so our high-value clients aren't disturbed. Riffraff. The word hung in the air like a foul smell. Is there a problem here? The voice boomed from the jet bridge door. A tall man with a thick neck and a Stratosphere Airlines blazer that strained at the buttons stepped out. His badge read, Greg Henderson, shift manager. Patricia's face transformed instantly. She adopted a look of victimhood, pointing a shaking finger at the twins. Greg, thank God. These two are refusing to leave the priority area. They're harassing me and blocking Mr. Connolly here from boarding. She gestured to the man in the grey suit. Greg Henderson didn't ask for the twins' side of the story. He didn't ask to see a ticket. He sized them up, hoodies, sneakers, black faces, and made his decision. Gentlemen, Greg said, his voice dropping to that patronizing, listen here, son, register. You need to grab your bags and go to the back of the line, now. I won't ask twice. Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You aren't going to check our tickets either. Is this company policy? Profiling before boarding? Greg stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. Policy is that I can deny boarding to anyone exhibiting aggressive or unruly behavior. Right now, you fit the description. You are disrupting operations. We are standing still, Tobias pointed out. The only person yelling is Patricia. That's it, Greg said. He unclipped his radio from his belt. Security to gate K-12. I have 2 non-compliant passengers refusing to vacate the priority lane. The man in the grey suit, Mr. Connolly, decided to chime in again. Just go, boys. You're embarrassing yourselves. You probably bought some fake tickets off a scam site anyway. Marcus looked at Greg. If you call security, Greg, you better make sure you're right. Because if I'm holding a valid first-class ticket and you deny me boarding based on how I look, that's a lawsuit Stratosphere Airlines can't afford. Greg sneered. I've been doing this 20 years, son. I can spot a fraud from a mile away. You think because you're wearing expensive-looking shoes you own the place? I know your type. You buy a refundable economy ticket, try to sneak into first, and cause a scene when you get caught. It's not happening on my watch. Greg turned to Patricia. Cancel their reservations. Whatever economy seats they have, dump them back into the pool. They aren't flying stratosphere today. Patricia smiled, a wicked, triumphant grin. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Done. Reservations cancelled. Seats 34E and 34F are now open. Marcus froze. 34E. We were in 1A and 1B. Not in my system, you weren't. Patricia lied smoothly. And now, you aren't anywhere. 2 airport police officers on bicycles were pedaling rapidly toward the gate. The crowd was murmuring, some filming, some shaking their heads in disgust at the twins, buying entirely into the narrative Greg and Patricia were spinning. Tobias looked at Marcus. The negotiation phase was over. They cancelled the tickets, Marcus, Tobias said softly. They actually deleted us. Marcus looked at the approaching police, then at Greg's smug face. He reached into his pocket. Put the phone away, Greg barked. No recording. I'm not recording, Marcus said, his voice eerily calm. I'm making a phone call. The police officers, Officer Miller and Officer Hernandez, arrived and dismounted, flanking the twins. Step away from the counter, Officer Miller commanded, hand resting near his belt. We've got a report of a disturbance. We are stepping away, Marcus said, backing up 3 paces. He unlocked his phone. His wallpaper was a photo of himself, Tobias, and their father on a yacht in the Mediterranean. Sir, put the phone down, Officer Hernandez warned. I'm allowed to make a phone call, officer, Marcus said, eyes locked on Greg. Unless I'm under arrest? Am I under arrest? The officers hesitated. Being annoying wasn't a crime, and they hadn't physically touched anyone. Make it quick, Miller grunted. Then you're being escorted out of the terminal. Marcus scrolled through his contacts. He didn't go to a lawyer. He didn't go to customer service. He scrolled to a contact saved simply as the chairman. He hit dial. Greg laughed, turning to Mr. Connolly. They always call Daddy or a lawyer. Think it scares us. The phone rang once, twice. Then a deep, gravelly voice answered, the voice of a man who moved mountains with a whisper. Marcus, you boys land yet? I'm tracking the flight. Looked like you were on time. Hey, Dad, Marcus said. He put the phone on speaker, but kept the volume low enough that only he, Tobias, and the nearby officers could hear the tone, if not the words. We're at the gate, K-12, but we have a problem. What kind of problem? Customs? No, Stratosphere staff, a gate agent named Patricia Gables, and a manager named Greg Henderson. They refused to scan our boarding passes. They told us we didn't belong in the priority lane. Then Greg ordered Patricia to delete our tickets. They called the cops on us, Dad. They're kicking us out of the airport. There was a silence on the line. It was a heavy, terrifying silence, the kind of silence that precedes a tsunami. They did what? Darius Sterling's voice was dangerously quiet. They said we looked like riffraff, accused us of fraud. Greg said he's been doing this 20 years and knows our type. Greg, seeing Marcus on the phone, stepped forward aggressively. I told you to get off the phone. You're trespassing now. Marcus held the phone up. Dad, the manager is yelling at me right now. He says I'm trespassing. Marcus, Darius said. Is the speaker on? Yes. Put the phone on the counter. Crank the volume. I want everyone to hear this. Marcus smiled. It was a shark's smile. He stepped forward, ignoring Officer Miller's outstretched hand, and placed the iPhone Pro Max on the high podium right in front of Patricia. He maximized the volume. Who is this? Greg demanded, leaning over the phone. Listen to me, whoever this is. Your sons are disturbing the peace and are currently banned from Stratosphere Airlines. If you have a problem, you can submit a complaint via our website. Mr. Henderson, the voice boomed from the phone. It was rich, authoritative, and carried an accent that sounded like old money and iron. "My name is Darius Sterling." Greg rolled his eyes. "Good for you, Darius. Come pick up your kids." "You seem to be confused, Mr. Henderson. You see, you work for Stratosphere Airlines. Stratosphere is a subsidiary of Aerolux Holdings." Greg paused. The name Aerolux sounded familiar. It was the parent company, the massive conglomerate that had just acquired Stratosphere in a hostile takeover 3 months ago. "And," Darius continued, his voice slicing through the noise of the terminal, "I am the CEO and majority shareholder of Aerolux Holdings. Which means, Mr. Henderson, I own the plane you are standing next to. I own the counter you are leaning on, and I own the job you are so poorly executing." Patricia stopped typing. Her face went pale. Greg let out a nervous chuckle. "Yeah, right. Anyone can say that on the phone. Nice try." "Verify it," Darius commanded. "Patricia, is it? Check the manifest for seat 1A and 1B. It shouldn't be deleted entirely from the history logs. Check the name on the original booking." Patricia's hands were shaking. She didn't want to look, but the authority in the voice compelled her. She tabbed over to the cancelled no-show list. She clicked on the history for the seats she had just dumped. Her breath hitched. Passenger, Sterling Marcus. Passenger, Sterling Tobias. Status, VIP, Chairman family, do not downgrade. "Greg," Patricia whispered, her voice trembling. "Greg, look." Greg leaned over the screen. The color drained from his face faster than water from a broken dam. "Are you looking at it, Greg?" Darius asked. "Now, look at the bottom of your screen. There should be a code for the internal corporate directory. Type in my name." Greg didn't move. He was frozen. "Type it!" Darius roared. Greg's trembling finger typed DARIUS STERLING. A photo popped up. It was the man on Marcus's phone wallpaper, but in the corporate photo he was wearing a suit, and the title under his name read Chairman of the Board, Global CEO. Marcus leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You were saying something about our type, Greg." "Here is what is going to happen," Darius said, his voice echoing through the silent gate area. "The boys are going to put me on FaceTime. I want to see your faces." Marcus switched the call to video. He held the phone up. Darius Sterling's face filled the screen, sitting in a boardroom in London, his eyes burning with a fury that transcended time zones. "Greg Henderson, Patricia Gables, you have humiliated my sons. You have racially profiled members of the ownership family, and you have weaponized the police against paying customers." "Sir, we didn't know," Greg stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You didn't know." Darius cut him off. "That is the problem. You shouldn't have to know who they are to treat them with dignity. But since you care so much about hierarchy, let me be clear." Darius paused. The entire gate area held its breath. Even Mr. Connolly in the grey suit was trying to shrink into the carpet. "Ground the plane," Darius said. "Excuse me?" Greg squeaked. "I said, ground the plane. Flight 404 to JFK is cancelled immediately. No one boards. No one leaves. I am initiating a full internal audit of the Chicago staff, effective this second." "Sir, you can't." "There are 300 passengers," Patricia cried out. "I can and I just did," Darius said. "I'd rather lose $500,000 in refunds than let this plane take off under the supervision of bigots. And as for you two," Darius leaned into the camera, "give your badges to the police officers. You are fired, effective immediately, and don't bother applying for unemployment. Our legal team will be contesting it based on gross misconduct and discriminatory practices." The phone call wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the nightmare for Greg and Patricia. The silence that followed Darius Sterling's command was broken only by the hum of the terminal's HVAC system and the distant announcements of other gates. At gate K12, however, time seemed to have stopped. Greg Henderson stared at the phone screen, his mouth slightly agape. The image of Darius Sterling, pixelated but terrifyingly clear, stared back. You can't ground a commercial flight, sir," Greg stammered, trying to regain a shred of authority in front of his staff and the 300 watching passengers. "The FAA clears flights, not owners. We have a schedule. We have slots." Darius didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Greg, look at your monitor." Greg turned his head slowly toward the podium computer. Patricia was already staring at it, her eyes wide with horror. On the screen, the standard Stratosphere Airlines departure grid, usually a comforting mix of blues and greens, flickered once, then twice. Then the entire screen went black. A moment later, a single red dialog box appeared in the center of every monitor at the gate, including the display board above the jet bridge that faced the passengers. It read, "System lockout, authorization code 0 Alpha Exec, flight status cancelled." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd of passengers. The on-time light above the door blinked out, replaced by the harsh, flashing red, "Cancelled." "My screen is locked," Patricia shrieked, tapping frantically on the keyboard. "I can't access the manifest. I can't print boarding passes. It says, 'User credential revoked.'" The door to the jet bridge swung open violently. Captain Reynolds, a veteran pilot with silver hair and 4 stripes on his shoulder, stormed out. He looked confused and angry. "Greg!" the captain barked. "What is going on? My flight computer just dumped the flight plan. ACARS is telling me to shut down the engines. Tower says our clearance was just pulled by corporate HQ. What did you do?" Greg was hyperventilating. He looked from the captain to the police, then to the twins. "It's not me!" Greg yelled, his voice cracking. It's him." He pointed at Marcus, who was still holding the phone. Officer Miller, who had been watching the scene unfold with a darkening expression, stepped forward. The dynamic had shifted. He wasn't looking at the twins as suspects anymore. He was looking at Greg as a liability. "Sir," Officer Miller said to Marcus, "is that your father still on the line?" "He is," Marcus replied. "May I speak to him?" Marcus handed the phone to the officer. "Mr. Sterling," Officer Miller said, his tone respectful. "This is Officer Miller, Chicago PD. We were called here on a report of a disturbance. Are you stating that these men, your sons, are authorized to be here?" "Officer Miller," Darius's voice was calm but iron hard. "My sons are not only authorized, they are VIP guests. The only disturbance occurring at Gate K12 is a manager filing a false police report to cover up a civil rights violation. I trust you know the penalty for utilizing police resources to enforce a personal bias?" Officer Miller's jaw tightened. He looked at Greg. The look was lethal. Police officers hated nothing more than being used as pawns in someone else's power trip. It made them look incompetent, and it opened the department up to lawsuits. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Miller said. He handed the phone back to Marcus. Miller turned to his partner, Officer Hernandez. "Hernandez, get statements from the witnesses in the line. I want to know exactly what words Mr. Henderson and Miss Gables used." "Wait!" Greg shouted. "You're taking their side. I'm the manager." "You're the suspect," Miller corrected him coldly. "You called 911 and claimed 2 men were aggressive and violent. I've been standing here 5 minutes, and the only aggressive person is you. If I find out you lied on that call, Henderson, you're leaving in cuffs. False reporting is a Class 4 felony." The blood drained from Greg's face so completely he looked like a wax figure. Meanwhile, the crowd of passengers realized what was happening. The flight wasn't just delayed, it was dead. And it was Greg's fault. "Hey!" a woman from the back of the line shouted. I have a connection in London. You're telling me I'm stuck here because you didn't like their hoodies." "I'm missing a wedding," another man yelled. The mob mentality that Greg had tried to weaponize against the twins suddenly swung around like a boomerang. People began booing. Phones were thrust over the cordon ropes, recording Greg's meltdown from 100 different angles. Mr. Connolly, the man in the grey suit who had told the twins to get out of the line, realized the wind had changed. He looked at the cancelled board, then at Marcus and Tobias. He swallowed hard, adjusting his tie, and took a tentative step toward them. "Gentlemen," Connolly said, putting on a slimy, ingratiating smile. "Look, I think we all got off on the wrong foot here. I didn't realize who you were. If I had known—" Tobias laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. "If you had known we were billionaires, you would have treated us with respect. Is that it?" "Well, I mean, naturally. Status carries certain—" "Save it," Marcus cut in, his voice icy. "The fact that you needed to know our bank balance to treat us like human beings is exactly why you're standing there, and I'm standing here. You wanted us gone? Congratulations, we aren't flying, and neither are you." Connolly opened his mouth to argue, but Officer Hernandez stepped in between them. "Back up, sir. Give them space." Suddenly, the PA system at the gate crackled to life. But it wasn't Patricia speaking. It was a voice from the main airport speakers, overriding the local system. "Attention at Gate K12. This is airport operations. We have a high-priority security change. Stratosphere staff Gregory Henderson and Patricia Gables are to surrender their credentials immediately to law enforcement. Regional Director Richard Thorne is en route to the gate. Repeat, staff are to surrender credentials immediately." The announcement echoed through the terminal like a judgment from God. Patricia slumped against the podium, burying her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. "My pension," she wailed. "I'm 3 years away from my pension." Greg stood paralyzed. Officer Miller unclipped a pair of handcuffs from his belt. He didn't arrest him yet, but he held them up as a visual warning. "Badges," Miller ordered. "Now." With trembling hands, Greg unclipped the laminate ID that had given him his petty power for 2 decades. He placed it on the counter. Patricia threw hers down next to it. "You can't do this," Greg whispered, looking at Marcus. "You ruined my life over a seat." Marcus stepped closer, looking Greg dead in the eye. "No, Greg. You ruined your life. I just made the phone call." 10 minutes later, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Striding down the concourse was a phalanx of 4 men in sharp navy suits, led by a man who looked like he chewed glass for breakfast. Richard Thorne, the regional vice president for Stratosphere Airlines, looked furious. He wasn't furious at the twins. He was furious at the PR nuclear bomb that had just detonated in his sector. Thorne spotted Marcus and Tobias. His demeanor shifted instantly from aggression to desperate apologetics. He ignored Greg and Patricia entirely, walking straight past them to the twins. Mr. Sterling, Thorne said, extending a hand to Marcus, then Tobias. "I am Richard Thorne, Regional VP. I am mortified. There are no words. I just got off the phone with your father and the board." "Mr. Thorne," Marcus said calmly, "you have a mess here." "We do," Thorne admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. "We are conducting a full investigation, but frankly, the video footage and the call logs are damning enough. We are issuing a public apology within the hour." Thorne turned slowly to face Greg and Patricia. They were huddled near the jet bridge door, looking small and defeated. "Henderson, Gables," Thorne barked. "You are relieved of duty. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated for cause. That cause being gross negligence, violation of anti-discrimination policies, and reputational damage to the brand." "Richard, please," Greg begged. "I've been here 20 years. Just a suspension. Give me a warning. I have a mortgage." Thorne's eyes were cold. "You should have thought about your mortgage before you tried to kick the chairman's sons off a plane because you didn't like their sneakers. You're lucky if we don't sue you for the revenue lost on this flight." Thorne turned to the police officers. "Officers, these individuals are no longer employees of Stratosphere Airlines. As such, they have no security clearance to be in the sterile area of the airport. Please escort them to the curbside exit." Officer Miller nodded. "With pleasure." "Let's go," Miller said, grabbing Greg's arm. "Grab your personal items. You're leaving." The walk of shame was brutal. As Greg and Patricia were marched away from the gate, past the long line of passengers they had inconvenienced, the crowd erupted. It wasn't just booing, people were clapping. "Bye, Karen!" someone shouted at Patricia. "Don't let the door hit you!" another yelled. Greg kept his head down, shielding his face from the dozens of phones recording his exit. He had wanted to humiliate the twins in front of an audience. Instead, he was becoming a global meme of failure and bigotry. As the ex-employees disappeared around the corner, the reality of the situation settled in. There was still a grounded plane and 300 stranded passengers. Mr. Connolly, sensing another opportunity to be the voice of the people, stepped up to Richard Thorne. "This is all well and good," Connolly said, puffing out his chest. "Justice served, blah blah blah. But what about us? My flight is cancelled. I'm a gold member. How are you getting me to New York tonight?" Thorne looked stressed. "Sir, we are trying to recrew the flight, but with the cancellation order, we lost our takeoff slot. The next available flight is tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. We will provide hotel vouchers." Groans erupted from the crowd. "Tomorrow?" Marcus looked at Tobias. They communicated silently, a twin telepathy honed over yours. Tobias nodded. "Mr. Thorne," Marcus said, raising his voice so the crowd could hear. "That won't be necessary." Thorne looked confused. "Sir?" "My father grounded this plane," Marcus said. "But Aerolux Holdings owns a fleet of private charters. There's a Gulfstream GX-50 and a Bombardier Global 7500 sitting in the hangar at Midway right now. And I believe there's a Stratosphere Reserve charter jet here at O'Hare." Marcus turned to the crowd. "Listen up," he announced. The crowd went silent. "I know this inconvenience was caused by the staff targeting us, but you all got caught in the crossfire, and most of you," he glanced pointedly at the people who had defended them or stayed quiet, "are just trying to get home. My brother and I are chartering a replacement aircraft. It will take us and anyone who needs to get to New York tonight. Free of charge, open bar, VIP catering." A cheer went up that was so loud it startled the TSA agents at the nearby checkpoint. People were high-fiving. The anger evaporated instantly. "However," Marcus added, his voice cutting through the cheers, "there is one exception." He pointed a finger directly at Mr. Connolly. "Mr. Connolly, was it?" Marcus asked. Connolly froze. "Yes? You seemed very concerned about the purity of the priority lane earlier. You didn't want riffraff like us slowing you down." I apologized," Connolly stammered. "You apologized when you found out we were rich," Tobias corrected him. "That's not an apology. That's a calculation." Marcus smiled. "Since you prefer the rules so much, we're going to stick to them. The charter flight is a private invitation only, and you aren't invited." "You can't leave me here," Connolly sputtered, his face turning red. "I have rights. I'm a gold member." "You can use your gold status to get a discount at the airport hotel," Marcus said dismissively. "Mr. Thorne, please ensure Mr. Connolly receives his voucher for the Holiday Inn. Everyone else, follow us to the VIP terminal." The crowd roared with laughter. Connolly stood alone in the middle of the red carpet, surrounded by his expensive luggage, watching the best flight he would never take walk away from him. The flight to New York was a party. The Sterling Charter, as the passengers dubbed it, was less like a flight and more like a celebration of justice. Champagne flowed. The twins took selfies with the passengers. They listened to stories, a grandmother going to see her new grandchild, a soldier returning from leave, a student heading to a master's program. By the time they landed at JFK, the story had already broken the internet. A passenger named Sarah, a 20-something with a large TikTok following, had uploaded the entire confrontation in a 3-part series titled Racist Airline Manager Tries to Check the Wrong Billionaire's Ash Karma Sterling Shutdown. The videos had 12 million views before the plane's wheels touched the tarmac in New York. In the videos, you could clearly see Patricia rolling her eyes, Greg pointing his finger in Marcus's face, and the glorious moment Marcus put the phone on speaker. The internet detectives went to work immediately. By the next morning, the fallout had moved from the airport to the real world. Trending topic: Desir's boycott stratosphere. Headline: CEO Darius Sterling terminates staff live on FaceTime. Headline: Who is Greg Henderson? The internet found him. Marcus and Tobias were sitting in the penthouse of the Sterling Tower in Manhattan, overlooking Central Park. They were eating breakfast, scrolling through their tablets. "Look at this," Tobias said, sliding his iPad across the marble table. It was a news report from a local Chicago station. "I'm standing outside the home of Gregory Henderson in suburban Chicago. Just hours after being fired for a viral altercation at O'Hare, Henderson is facing new troubles. Neighbors report seeing a moving truck this morning, but not for a planned move. It appears Henderson's Homeowners Association has called an emergency meeting regarding violation of community conduct codes. Furthermore, the local youth baseball league, where Henderson volunteers as a coach, released a statement minutes ago. Due to behavior incompatible with our values of sportsmanship and inclusion, Mr. Henderson has been permanently banned from all league activities." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. "Hard karma." "It gets worse," Tobias said. "Or better, depending on how you look at it." Patricia. He tapped another link. Gate agent in viral video investigated for past conduct. Following the incident with the Sterling brothers, 3 other families have come forward with formal complaints against Patricia Gables, alleging similar discriminatory behavior over the last 5 years. Stratosphere Airlines has announced they are stripping Gables of her accumulated pension benefits under the morality clause of her contract. "She lost the pension," Marcus whispered. "She actually lost it." "She played a stupid game," Tobias said, standing up and walking to the window. "She won a stupid prize." But the story wasn't quite over, because while the employees had been punished, the system that allowed them to act that way was still broken. And Darius Sterling wasn't done cleaning house. The elevator to the penthouse dinged. Darius walked in. He looked tired but energized. He threw a thick file onto the breakfast table. "Good morning, boys," Darius said. "Enjoy the flight?" "It was eventful," Marcus said. "Did you see the news about Greg and Patricia?" "Small potatoes," Darius said, waving his hand. "I'm not interested in just firing 2 bad apples. I'm interested in the tree." He tapped the file. "I've called an emergency board meeting for noon. We are restructuring the entire customer service training protocol for Stratosphere, and I'm appointing 2 new heads of the Customer Experience and Inclusion Board." Darius smiled at his sons. "You 2. Marcus blinked. "Us. Dad, we have our own tech company to run." "You can do both," Darius said. "You experienced the failure of the system firsthand. Who better to fix it? Besides, the The stock price dipped 4% this morning because of the bad PR. I need the Sterling brothers' face on the recovery campaign to bring it back up." Tobias looked at Marcus. It was a lot of responsibility. But remembering the look on the grandmother's face when she realized she wouldn't miss her grandson's birth, remembering the feeling of powerlessness that so many others must feel who don't have a CEO dad. "We'll do it," Marcus said. "On one condition." "Name it," Darius said. "We want a direct reporting line for discrimination complaints. No middle managers. No Gregs burying the reports. A direct line to this office." "Done," Darius said. The internet is a strange beast. It devours a story, chews on it for 48 hours, and then spits it out to move on to the next scandal. For the millions of people who had watched the Sterling shutdown videos, the incident at O'Hare was old news within 2 weeks. But for the people who lived it, the nightmare was only just beginning. Karma, real karma, isn't a lightning bolt. It's a slow-moving glacier. It grinds you down, inch by inch, until there is nothing left. 3 months after the incident, Patricia Gable sat in a small, fluorescent-lit courtroom in downtown Chicago. She wasn't there as a criminal defendant, at least not yet. She was there as a plaintiff. In a move of breathtaking audacity, she had sued Stratosphere Airlines for wrongful termination and defamation of character. She claimed she was a victim of hostile workplace circumstances and that the viral video had been edited to make her look bad. She sat stiffly in her polyester blazer, the same one she used to wear with pride at the gate, clutching her purse. Her lawyer, a court-appointed attorney who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, was shuffling papers nervously. Opposite them sat the legal team for Stratosphere Airlines. They didn't look tired. They looked like sharks in Italian suits. Leading them was Marcus Sterling's personal recommendation, a corporate litigator named Julian Vance. Note, avoiding band name Vance, correcting to Jericho Stone. Jericho Stone didn't even look at Patricia. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Patricia's lawyer stammered. "My client was under extreme duress. She followed protocol regarding suspicious passengers. The termination of her pension and benefits was a retaliatory act by a company trying to save face." The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Justice Halloway, peered over her glasses. "Mr. Stone?" Jericho stood up. He didn't make a speech. He simply pressed a button on the remote in his hand. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't the viral TikTok video. It was the high-definition security footage from Gate K-12, including the audio recording from the podium microphone that Patricia had forgotten was always on. The courtroom listened in dead silence. "I don't need to scan anything to know you're in the wrong place. Riff-raff, back of the line." The audio was crisp. It was hateful. It was undeniable. Then Jericho played a second clip. This one was from 2 years prior. It showed Patricia screaming at a young Hispanic mother who was struggling to fold a stroller. The audio captured Patricia calling the woman a drain on the system. Jericho turned off the screen. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "Ms. Gables," Jericho said, his voice smooth and dangerous. "You claim you were following protocol. Stratosphere Airlines Manual, Section 4, Paragraph 2 states, all passengers are to be treated with dignity, regardless of attire, race, or class. Did you violate this protocol?" I was just..." Patricia stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Did you, or did you not, delete the valid first-class tickets of Marcus and Tobias Sterling simply because you didn't like how they looked?" "I thought they were drug dealers," Patricia blurted out. A gasp went through the courtroom. Even her own lawyer put his head in his hands. Justice Halloway slammed her gavel down. The sound was like a gunshot. "Enough," the judge said, her face cold. "Ms. Gables, your prejudice is not a defense. It is an admission of guilt. Not only is this lawsuit dismissed with prejudice, but I am finding in favor of the defendant's counterclaim for legal fees." Patricia's eyes widened in horror. "Legal fees? But Stratosphere has millions. I have nothing." "You have a house, don't you?" Justice Halloway asked. "You wasted the court's time and this company's resources with a frivolous lawsuit to cover up your own bigotry. You will pay Stratosphere Airlines legal costs, estimated at $85,000. Step down." Patricia collapsed into her chair, sobbing. $85,000. That was her equity. That was her savings. That was her life. She had walked into the courtroom hoping for a settlement. She walked out a bankrupt woman. While Patricia was losing her past savings, Greg Henderson was losing his future. Greg had always defined himself by his job. He was the manager. He was the guy in charge. Without the badge, without the radio, he was just a middle-aged man with a bad back and a mortgage he couldn't afford. The hard karma hit Greg in the form of isolation. A month after the firing, Greg had tried to get a job at a logistics company. It was a step down, a warehouse supervisor role, but he needed the money. The interview had gone well. The hiring manager, a guy named Dave, seemed to like him. "Well, Greg, you've got the experience," Dave had said, closing the file. "I just need to run the standard background check and social media sweep. Standard procedure." Greg's stomach had dropped. "Is that necessary? I have references." "Corporate policy," Dave smiled. "Don't worry. If you have nothing to hide, it's fine." 2 days later, Greg got the email. It was one sentence. "Thank you for your interest, but we have decided to pursue other candidates whose values align closer with our company culture." It happened again, and again, and again. No one would hire him. The moment they typed Greg Henderson Chicago into Google, the first result was the video of him sneering at the Sterling twins. The second result was a parody video mocking his chin. The third result was the news of his firing. His digital footprint was a minefield. He was radioactive. 6 months later, the bank finally came for the house. It was a rainy Tuesday. A moving truck was parked in the driveway of the 2-story colonial in the suburbs that Greg had been so proud of. But it wasn't a professional moving company. He couldn't afford one. It was just Greg and his brother-in-law, hauling boxes out to a rented U-Haul. His neighbors, people he had barbecued with for 10 years, watched from behind their curtains. No one came out to help. No one waved goodbye. They didn't want to be associated with the airport racist. The social exile was complete. "Careful with that TV," Greg snapped, his nerves frayed. "Look, Greg, I'm doing you a favor here." His brother-in-law shot back, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You're lucky Linda is even letting you stay in our basement. If it was up to me—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Greg walked into his empty living room for the last time. The carpet still held the indentations of his recliner. He looked at the wall where his Manager of the Year 2018 plaque used to hang. The wall was bare now, just a pale square where the paint hadn't faded. He had lost his career. He had lost his home. He had lost his standing in the community. And for what? Because he wanted to feel superior to 2 young men in hoodies for 5 minutes. He walked out the front door, closing it on his old life forever. While Greg was loading his failures into a U-Haul, Marcus and Tobias Sterling were 30,000 feet above him. Stratosphere Airlines had changed. It wasn't just a PR stunt. The Sterling Protocol was now the gold standard in the aviation industry. Every boarding denial had to be logged, justified, and reviewed by an independent officer within 24 hours. If a pattern of bias was found, the employee was terminated immediately. The stock price, which had dipped initially, was now at an all-time high. The public loved the redemption arc. They loved that the company had owned its mistake and fixed it. Marcus sat in the leather seat of the family's Gulfstream GS850, reviewing the quarterly report. "Customer satisfaction is up 15%, Marcus said, taking a sip of sparkling water. "And discrimination complaints are down 90%. Tobias looked up from his tablet. He looked older, wiser than he had 6 months ago. "We did good work, Marcus. Dad is pleased." "Dad is never pleased," Marcus laughed. "But he's satisfied. That's as close as we get." Tobias looked out the window. The clouds below were thick and grey, a blanket of rain covering Chicago. "Do you ever wonder about them?" Tobias asked quietly. "Greg and Patricia?" Marcus paused. He set his glass down. "I don't wonder, I know. Our legal team sends updates." "And?" "Patricia is filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy next week. She's moving in with her sister in Ohio. And Greg—" Marcus tapped his screen, pulling up a background report. "Greg is working 2 jobs. He washes dishes at a diner on the night shift, and he drives a shuttle bus for a discount parking lot during the day." Tobias shook his head. "That's rough." "It is," Marcus agreed. "But they chose it. They had every chance to just scan the ticket. They had every chance to apologize before Dad got on the phone. They dug their hole, Tobias. Now they have to live in it." The Gulfstream began its descent, banking sharply over the city. Down on the ground, the rain was relentless. Greg Henderson sat in the driver's seat of the EZ Park and Fly shuttle bus. The heater was broken, and the bus smelled of wet wool and diesel fumes. His radio crackled. "Driver 4, loop back to Terminal 5. We have a large party coming in." "Copy," Greg muttered. His voice was raspy. He was exhausted. His back ached from sleeping on a cot in his brother-in-law's basement. He pulled the bus up to the curb at Terminal 5. The automatic doors hissed open, letting in the freezing rain. He watched as people scurried onto his bus, dragging their wet luggage, complaining about the weather, complaining about the wait. Greg looked at them. He wanted to yell. He wanted to say, "I used to be in charge. I used to run this terminal." But he said nothing. He couldn't afford to. He needed this $14 an hour. As he merged back into traffic, the bus rattled and shook. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he saw a movement in the sky. A sleek, silver private jet was climbing rapidly, effortlessly piercing through the storm clouds, heading toward the sun. The tail of the jet caught the light. Greg stared at it. He knew that plane. Everyone in aviation knew that plane. It belonged to the Sterling family. For a fleeting second, the disparity of the universe was laid bare in front of him. Up there, in the sunlight, were the men he had tried to crush. They were drinking champagne, discussing billion-dollar mergers and changing the world. Down here, in the mud, was Greg, gripping a sticky steering wheel, driving in circles, trapped in a prison of his own making. He had tried to deny them a seat on a commercial flight. So, the universe had denied him a seat at the table of life. A passenger behind him tapped on the glass partition. "Hey, driver, can you turn the heat up? It's freezing in here." Greg looked in the rearview mirror. He saw his own tired, defeated eyes staring back. "The heat is broken," Greg said softly. "Everything is broken." He pressed the gas pedal, driving the bus back into the rain, while the jet disappeared into the blue, untouchable sky. And that brings us to the end of the Sterling shutdown. It's a brutal reminder that actions have consequences, and in the digital age, those consequences are swift and permanent. Greg and Patricia spent years building their careers, only to lose it all in 10 minutes because they couldn't see past their own prejudices. They thought they were the gatekeepers, but they ended up locking themselves out. The twins didn't just get revenge, they got justice. They used their power to fix a broken system, ensuring that what happened to them wouldn't happen to the next person in that line. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the punishment fit the crime? Was losing their homes and pensions too much, hard karma, or was it exactly what they deserved for how they treated people? Let me know your verdict in the comments down below. I read and pinned the best ones. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story about entitlement meeting reality. Be kind to each other, and remember, you never know who you're talking to. Thanks for watching.